Good morning. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our panelists, set the stage with a little bit of energy utility industry context. They're going to make some opening remarks, and then we'll have questions. I have some prepared questions, and we'll take questions from the audience. As our panelists are giving their opening remarks, Ting Ting and another student passed out index cards, and we'd encourage you to please write your questions on the index card. If you're a student, please put an S in the upper right-hand corner so that we know that that question came from a student. We want to make sure that we engage our students in this process this morning. Chris Vlahopoulos and Paula Sims, where are you guys? Will collect index cards probably when Tom is doing his opening remarks, and then we'll go to audience questions. We are extremely fortunate today with this panel. We have two industry leaders in our region and in our nation, Lynn Good and Tom Fanning. Lynn is the president, CEO, and vice chairman of Duke Energy. Duke is one of the largest energy utilities in the country and also has international operations. Lynn became CEO in July 2013. Prior to that, she was EVP and CFO, and also had responsibility for strategy, corporate development, IT, and supply chain. Lynn serves on the boards of the Edison Electric Institute, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, Hubble Incorporated, and the Bechtler Museum of Modern Art in Charlotte. Tom Fanning is the chairman, president, and CEO of the Southern Company, also one of the largest energy utilities in the U.S. He has served in those roles since 2010. Prior to that, he served as CFO and then COO. Tom is the chair of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta and serves on the Georgia Tech College of Management Advisory Board, the Georgia Tech Foundation, the board of the Institute of Nuclear Operations, and he is the vice chairman of the Edison Electric Institute. Please join me in welcoming and thanking our distinguished panel for being here. These are not only two of the largest energy utilities in the country, they are two of the most admired, and we're very fortunate. Before I turn the microphone over to Lynn for opening remarks, I'm just going to set the stage. The energy utility industry is, in my opinion, the most important industry in the country. Without it, we would have no comfort, we would have no security, we would have no economy, we would have no growth, we would have no information, and we'd have no learning, and we'd be sitting in the dark right now. The energy utility industry and its ecosystem, however, faces unprecedented change and complexity and uncertainty, and it faces unprecedented opportunity for innovation and reimagining, which is part of why we're here. What we see, let me set the stage with the industry context. There is a dramatic reconfiguration of central station generation. The industry grew up thinking that power plants had to be big and centralized. We're seeing the rise of gas and the decline of coal. I'll talk more about that in a second. We're seeing the growth of renewables, especially wind in the past 10 years, and now solar's where wind was then. 3 nuclear sites coming online this decade. There are predictions of disruptive technology. Pick your poison, distributed generation, microgrids, storage, whatever technology you believe in. Most industry observers believe that there will be a disruptive technology in the next 10 or 15 years, and there's a raging debate about the implications for that for the utility business model. There's a huge need for capital investment. This is the third most capital-intensive activity in the country. We need capital investment for infrastructure, especially transmission for renewables and gas pipelines and storage for gas. There is a stringent set of EPA regulations. Mercury and air toxics is going to cause 1/6 of the coal fleet to retire and 5% of all the generation in the U.S. The Clean Power Plan, which will regulate carbon dioxide, has been proposed, as currently proposed. That will double or quadruple the amount of coal retiring. There's inexpensive natural gas from horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, and then there is declining growth. This industry used to see electricity consumption growth of double digits in the 50s, and then single digits in the 80s and 90s, and now we're seeing maybe less than 1% according to EIA for the next 20 or 30 years. Good news for the environment, bad news if you're a capital-intensive, high fixed cost industry. So with that as the backdrop, it's an exciting business environment, one in which our panelists lead their organization and they help lead our industry. So Lynn and Tom, can you please share some opening remarks, and then I'll ask you some questions. You said all curveballs, right, Tom?
Absolutely. Knuckleballs, curveballs, anything.
Okay, Stuart, thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. I'm going to get us started with a discussion about transformation. And, you know, as I look at the agenda that all of you have had an opportunity to participate in, you're covering a broad spectrum of the energy industry and all kinds of new technologies, and innovation has been the theme for the last couple of days, and I'm excited to be a part of that. It's interesting when you think about the energy industry, because certainly we can talk about technology, we can talk about public policy changes, Stuart talked about that, we can talk about business model changes, and we can also talk about customer preferences, which are important as a consideration in our business as well. And I think what makes the pace of change so extraordinary is you have a convergence of all of those things happening at the same time. And we're not only talking about transforming the utility industry, we're talking about transforming our communities and our states, because you can replace the word utility with electric infrastructure of the United States. It is what makes us what we are. It powers everything that we do. Stuart called it comfort and convenience, security, safety, businesses. And so what we're talking about is transformation of all of that. And at Duke Energy, we sit at the intersection of all of those competing priorities. We also sit at the intersection of short and long-term decision making. We have to keep the power on right now, everywhere, everyone, every minute, and at the same time prepare for the future. And you might be interested to know, sitting here in Raleigh, North Carolina, that we are having an all-time peak today. So this temperature, 710 this morning, I'm watching the load rise and hoping that everything that we operate will keep the lights on and the heat going for this important area. And so this convergence of events that's sitting at the intersection is what makes it so interesting and what makes it such a compelling time to be in this industry. And so when we think about this at Duke, we're not thinking about adapting to change. We're thinking about leading transformation, because we believe transformation is occurring. And I wanted to share perspective just from 3 areas as we start this conversation. As we think about transformation, we think about it from the perspective of customers. We think about it from the perspective of generation resources, and we'll touch on some of those today. And then we'll think about it from the perspective of integration and how we make it all work. The grid might be another way to think about the role of integration. And for us at Duke, I'll talk first about customers. Customers are at the center of everything we do. And I think we have to challenge ourselves as we think about transformation on what value are we bringing to the customers that depend on us. In the Carolinas, I have 4 million households that I provide power to. So somewhere between maybe 10 and 12 million people count on me every day. Across the Duke system, over 20 million people. Every hour, every day, every season, everywhere, universal access to electricity. And those customers are changing, their expectations are changing, they have an interest in control and choice, they have an interest in new forms of communication, they also have an interest in what type of energy is being delivered to them. And so we are transforming and thinking about and really challenging what we're delivering and whether it will continue and how it can continue to really drive value for our customers. And I think there are a couple of things, even in the midst of transformation, that customers expect of us and require of us. One of them is reliability. And I had an opportunity just a few weeks ago to spend time with the CEO of one of our textile firms here in the Carolinas. And he basically said to me, Lynn, it's your product that keeps my factory onshore in the U.S. If I don't have the competitive advantage of energy, I can't compete against lower labor prices overseas. You help me be competitive. You also need to make sure that my power has no upsets over any period of time, because my advanced technology in manufacturing requires no intermittency, no change in voltage. I need high quality power all the time. And so that reliability notion and that notion of affordability is something that our customers expect from us, and it needs to be a part of the conversation around transformation. I have the same conversation at times with senior citizens and fixed income, low income members of our community. It's important to remember that about 40% of who I serve has an income level of $40,000 a year or less. One more dollar of energy costs can be very transformative and impactful to those customers. And so transformation within that context is important. The second thing I would point to is diversification. We are transforming forms of generating electricity. Stuart talked about them. It's renewables. It's packaging renewables with storage technologies. It's natural gas. And Duke has been modernizing for the better part of 10 years. If we even look back to 2008, there was zero energy in the western part of the Carolinas from natural gas. Today, it represents about 25% of what we deliver. We're investing in a new pipeline to provide additional infrastructure into the state. And working closely with solar partners, I had a chance to spend some time with the CEO of Strata this morning. North Carolina is the 4th in the nation in installation of solar. It's something that Duke has been a part of and has led the way in bringing renewable energy into this part of the country. But as we continue to transform and introduce new resources, I think it's important to recognize that diversity of resources is extraordinarily important. Today, I operate nuclear, I operate coal, I operate natural gas, renewables, hydro, and energy efficiency, all as part of a portfolio that makes it possible for us to do what we do. And on a morning like this one, at 7:10 in the morning, I'm thankful I have every single form of that generation in order to provide the power that all of you count on. And then the third thing I'd point to around transformation is the grid and the integration. And so many of you operate in a smart grid space or with new meters or communication devices and other things. I would say to you as we go through this transformation that the grid is going to be increasingly important. Because we built a grid many decades ago and have continued to maintain it to provide electricity from central station to the home. And now we're going to need to accommodate a lot of different things. Distributed energy resources, two-way flows, enabling energy management systems within our customer premises. And that form of investment and that form of change is something that we spend a lot of time on at Duke. We're studying battery technology. We're studying microgrids. We're studying new forms of communication. We're bringing together IT and communication companies to help us think about how we can continue to migrate the grid. And whether you believe that central station generation is going away in our lifetime or not, that grid is going to be important for the next several decades to ensure that we can deliver reliable power and affordable power. So we come to this period of transformation with great optimism. I don't think we can even imagine what the technology is going to look like 10 years from now or 15 years from now. But I also believe strongly in collaboration, having the kinds of conversations necessary to deal with really tough issues that have the potential to impact not only our industry, but the communities that we work in. So really look forward to the conversation and opportunities to work together.
Thank you, Lynn. Tom?
It is great to be here, Lynn. That was great stuff. And you'll find a lot of my comments and Lynn's are going to be pretty similar. I do want to start with taking an exception with something. And you finished off your comments with this idea that somehow this is threatening to a business model. I actually don't think about that. And any element of strategy, if you go back to Sun Tzu and the Art of War, Barbarians at the Gate, whatever it is, there's this note, and I always try to teach our folks at Southern, that if you don't run your business as well as you can, somebody else will. And it really goes to the whole evolution of kind of the national economy. See, I'm going to start at kind of a higher level and drill it down, but through my role at the Fed, through a variety of kind of national forums that I try to be pretty active in, and we try to view ourselves as having a national platform at Southern. I'm always fascinated. You go on these shows, so I guest host Squawk Box a good bit, and I get to know those guys, and you get on and they say, you know, they always start off every morning, they say good morning, and then they spend the next 3 hours telling you why it's not a good morning, right? And a similar statistic that you use is so fascinating. I run around. when we think about the issue, the confluence of the American economy and energy, energy is one of the ways that I think Americans are thirsting for a way to play offense and otherwise a set of challenges that people love to talk about. And that's why I get so fired up. 46% of the families we are privileged to serve make less than $40,000 a year. And see, it isn't about us. If we ever define the problem as it's a threat to us, it's about us, wrong. It's all about the families, because what those families want is for their children a better place to live, better food on the table, better medical care, better education here at UNC, right? And we have almost, I won't say an unassailable advantage, but darn near an unassailable advantage in a worldwide economy by taking advantage of this nation's blessings of resources and innovation to create more jobs, to create growth and income, to the degree that, as a nation, we can promote an idea, and I co-chaired this at the Business Roundtable, along with Dave Cody of Honeywell, the concept that America can be energy secure. It doesn't mean independent. But with energy security, I think that breeds national security, and I think that breeds economic security. And at the end of the day, with all the challenges that we're facing, and you read about Greece and the European Union, and you see the event risk in the Middle East and the Ukraine, and all the challenges we see in China and Abenomics, the United States can be a bastion, a beacon for the world in terms of how to sustainably advance our economy. And the center of that is energy, the advantages that we have right now. Now, I'm not going to give you the long speech, even though it sounded like a speech. There are three things that I look for. Number one is the full portfolio. I started out 4 years ago talking about all the arrows in the quiver. I thought that was really catchy. But when President Obama came out with all the above, I think we all subordinated our phrasing to that. I'm proud to say Southern Company is the only company in America, in fact, doing all the above. We are building new nuclear. We are building a coal plant with a host of challenges that is cleaner than natural gas. We are a leader in moving away from coal to natural gas. We are a leader in renewables, particularly photovoltaic solar. And then energy efficiency is an enormously important part of the mix. So that's the full portfolio. The second is that America needs to reinvest in the whole notion of energy innovation. You talk about transformation and all that stuff. The engine for transformation will be innovation. I've always been proud to say that Southern Company is the only company that remains in our industry deeply invested in robust proprietary research and development. We've had a team in place, and we devote hundreds of millions of dollars to it since the late 60s. We developed new coal technologies, new pollution control technologies, and now we're changing the focus away from coal to a whole new way to play offense in this new environment. And I think when you think about the challenges of what we used to do, make, move, and sell electricity, I think the notion of stopping the electron at the meter is getting to be an outmoded kind of thing. And I think we need to redefine what we mean by a product or service in terms of representing infrastructure in a home or in a business or in a manufacturing facility. And it does go to things that you kind of mentioned. It goes to the whole idea of rooftop solar, storage, combined heat and power, HVAC, not necessarily Nest thermostats, but the idea, I think it's the daughter or son of Nest, and that is a server in a home that will connect the Internet of Things and permit a great leap forward, I think, in energy efficiency. So there's a whole kind of cool thing to talk about energy innovation. I hope we will. And I'll just pick and be a little provocative here again. Distributed generation is not at all disruptive. Zero. That's something we should do anyway. It's a no-brainer. What is disruptive potentially is storage. And I think if you now find a way to economically combine storage with distributed generation, then you do have something that's disruptive. The other disruptive thing that I think is this notion of what is the next version of a Nest thermostat. It's not a thermostat, it's a server that connects the Internet of Things. The final point I'll just make, so I talked about the full portfolio. I talked about the need for innovation. The third point really goes to national policy. There is so much that the United States can stand to benefit for that gives us this potentially unassailable advantage for decades to come, unlike at any time in my lifetime or yours or our parents, that I think we need fiscal policy, federal policy brought to bear in a rational way. We need to unlock a frozen Congress. And I think people from both sides of the aisle, we will find bilateral support for some of the things that I'm talking about, number one. Number two, you did talk about the notion of capital formation. It's so important to this business. We need comprehensive tax reform that doesn't prejudice one form of energy or over another. And the final thing is we need to get smart about allocating national resources. And I think we can do much better. Whether you believe this is a Republican issue or a Democrat issue, man, these are American issues. And whether you want bigger government or smaller government, what government needs to be about is growing the economy. That is what's going to lift the boats of all the people we are privileged to serve. Because at the end of the day, a stronger American economy is going to drive everything forward in a better way. We'll be able to do things that otherwise are unavailable in a much more effective manner. So that's the quick speech. But I think there's so much there that I'd love to engage you guys on. And as provocative as you want to be, bring it on. Great to be here.
Thank you, Tom. Let's start with all of the above. There's a lot of discussion about generation portfolio diversity. If I remember my finance class here at Keenan-Flagler, they said, don't buy only one stock, the one that was cheapest yesterday, because you will not be on the efficient risk-return frontier. You should have a diverse portfolio of stocks. And the same principle, many say, applies to generation, and that's the all of the above. My question is, what steps can we take to ensure the industry has the right generation portfolio diversity? What can utilities do, but also what can be done in public policy, what can be done by markets and RTOs, what can be done by non-utility players so that we end up with a diverse portfolio and don't make the mistake, as perhaps has been made in the past, of all building the same thing at the same time?
You know, I can start, Tom, and I'm sure you know, we're in a similar place on this because all of the above is what makes it work. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be innovating around every element of what we do, because I think innovation will make diversity even better. But as a business that has to have responsibility for 24/7 operation, it's essential that we have a diverse set of resources. And this industry, at times, has run headlong into a direction, and we end up overexposed to a given commodity, and it just doesn't end well when we do that. So the industry is constantly trying to find ways to balance and maintain diversity. And right now, in this season, we've got it. We have nuclear, we have coal, we have gas, we have renewables, we have energy efficiency, we have hydrogeneration. I think maintaining that diversity in the future is going to be really, really difficult because coal is coming off the table, nuclear is extraordinarily difficult to build, gas is the thing that looks economic now, but we know that can change over time. Renewables are important, but their characteristics are such that we cannot count on them every hour of the day without the breakthrough in technology that Tom talked about, potentially storage being a solution. And so I think forums like this, where we can talk about the specifics of what it takes to keep universal access 24/7 for electricity, is what's going to be important for us to move forward collectively around this really important infrastructure. And so that we can not only impact what we're doing today, but impact it for, you know, decades to come. By 2030, there will be, you know, another 4 million people in North Carolina counting on us for power. Let's make sure we get that right.
Yeah, you know, I have the responsibility, as do policymakers in Washington, to balance the sometimes competing objectives of clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy that will drive this economy and create jobs and grow personal incomes and make American lives better. So that's kind of where I start with that. But I want to give you just a funny kind of phrase that I use. We have to survive in both the long-term and short-term. And there's really three types of institutions in the world, companies, whatever. And I always like to call them in terms of birds of prey, moving prey, and roadkill. Now, what determines your station in life is determined by your ability, I think, first to provide a long-term sustainable existence. So let's just kind of think about that. And if you're able to do that, how well do you provide short-term? Birds of prey are people, institutions, companies that I think, like Southern, start with long-term viability first, and that goes in everything we do. Then we make the short-term results work. Moving prey are the kind of people or institutions or companies that typically optimize short-term results all the time and very often imperil their long-term viability. You see it all the time, and you see it in politics, you see it in economics, you see it in corporate life. You can't get focused on the short term. You've got to keep the long term first, make the short term work. And then the last guys, the roadkill guys, you know who they are. They can't even get out of bed in the morning. When I think about the very important issues of kind of the energy portfolio, it's very easy to get caught up in the idea that gas is cheap and therefore everything is gas. Janice here has a set of material that we have, or you can get it on the internet, but we have some innovation material. There's an article I did I was the weekend interview in the Wall Street Journal. And unfortunately, the title of the big thing was called The Natural Gas Skeptic. I'm not a natural gas skeptic. I guess I'm a skeptic on everything. And what we've got to do is find a way. We know during polar vortex 1 and 2, if you were in the Northeast and you didn't have firm transportation for natural gas during that very tough time, some people paid well over $100 per million BTU. And when we think about where energy policy in America may be going, it's questionable that the infrastructure will exist in order to supply that very important part of our generating capacity in America. So therefore, you must have everything else in play. And we can demonstrate. We saved customers last polar vortex 1 and 2 by having the optionality to change among the different portfolio segments about $125 million in fuel savings during 2 short periods in our history in 2013, or I'm sorry, 2014. So having the optionality. So here again, business school, right? Every option has value, even if you're out of the money. That goes to the notion of a portfolio, right? One of the things that I think we would both share is that as you think about the future, it is not converging in terms of an answer. I think rather it is diverging. And I think therefore an options-based portfolio strategy, which enables us to take advantage of the rapidly changing conditions, not only in consumption, but in technology availability, are key to America's success.
So, as I ask the next question, just want to remind folks, if you haven't done your index cards and passed them to Chris and Paula, Tom's asking for the tough questions, so bring it. So while we are creating an option-based portfolio and making sure we don't do the herd instinct, because that does never end well, there is, as you referred to, a debate about the utility business model and death spirals. So here's the thesis. What people say is that as distributed generation like rooftop solar goes, people will secede from the grid. When people secede from the grid in a high fixed cost industry, that means everybody else's prices have to go up because somebody has to pay for it. And the effect of their prices going up causes other people to secede from the grid, and you get a death spiral. There are three views on this. One view is that words like death spiral, I think I've heard the term Sharknado, mortal threat, that there could be a little bit of hype in this, and if you're in the trade press, it's fun to write about, but there's no... A second theory that it is real, and the business gearing and fundamentals are going to change, and then there's a third theory that this is an opportunity and an option for industry. So with that as the backdrop, three questions. Is this hype? Is it inevitable? Who's right about this and why? What changes are possible, and what should utilities do now?
So it's hype. There's no death spiral. There will always be an infrastructure part of the energy business in America. And in fact, I would argue that electricity is getting more important, not less. I love the notion that energy efficiency is really taking off, and I own a Tesla car, and I have all this cool stuff. I have LED lighting. Those of you in marketing, you should get the notion that if you can make a product more efficient, cheaper, more available, that rises its availability to be consumed. And I think when you think about the power of electricity, excuse the pun, and the notion that you can displace other nastier forms of energy, when you think about all the goofy devices that we carry around, boy, I think the future of electricity is fantastic, number one. So there is a demand that I think will continue to grow. Number two, if we understand, if we try and keep as an industry the waves off the beach in terms of technology innovation, if we shut off our idea as to what is possible from a generation standpoint, then I think you could be looking at a death spiral. You will just force yourself into a block. But we at Southern, one of the things that I mentioned about our research and development ideas, I think the bigger idea is storage. Now, we always kind of translate storage into micro kind of notions, right? Like batteries, okay? Well, what about the earth as a storage device? What about ideas like pump storage hydro, CAES, compressed air energy storage, storage at scale that will be able to take advantages of, perhaps in Texas, negatively priced wind energy that we can use to store energy in the earth and then extract it during peak periods. Let's think about community solar applications. I think those are kind of the ideas that have some legs. What we have to do is understand what is the infrastructure of the future. And I think that really goes to this idea that we have of beyond the meter, storage, renewable, distributed generation, combined heat and light, HVAC, the Internet of Things being driven by a server in a home. I think we can really connect with a lot of different economic factors. I think the idea, so long as you're willing to play offense, the idea of a death spiral is kind of cool to talk about, but a dumb idea.
So, Lynn, how about Sharknado and the death spiral?
I think it's an interesting and it's a provocative question, but I would substitute the word electric infrastructure for utility. And I hope none of us believe that electric infrastructure is headed to a death spiral. It is so integral to everything we do. Tom talks about it powering America. It's what powers industry. It's what powers our home. And what we're talking about is transforming that infrastructure to continue to keep America competitive, continue to keep industry competitive, continue to provide universal access to electricity. And so I come to it with great optimism to invest and innovate and find ways that we can continue to provide extraordinary service to our customers in a way that they expect, in a way that our country expects as well. And I think it represents extraordinary opportunity for us. And that's the challenge at a gathering like this one, that we have a group of people who are so keen on innovating. Let's figure out how to innovate the electric infrastructure of the United States to maintain the competitiveness that we all count on. And in my mind, that's what the question is. We certainly don't want a death spiral of the infrastructure of our country.
Yeah, and remember, even the notion, remember I said before, it can't be about us, it's got to be about customers? Even the notion of death spiral says it's something about us. It's got to be about you. And therefore, what you've got to do is just redefine the whole issue. It's really changing the question and therefore changing your approach to an answer.
The other thing I would, if you just imagine for a moment, the kind of continuation of this discussion of infrastructure death spiral, that would mean that every building, every home, every industry in the United States would be off the grid. I don't see that in 5 years. Do we see that in 10 years? We need to think about how, if that's the vision of the future we want, and that's worth a public policy debate and a discussion among all of you, it'll be your generation and beyond that'll be living in that world, we have to get from here to there in a way that provides electricity 24/7, right? So this infrastructure has to continue to evolve and transform in a way that we can all count on, and that's what we should come to with enthusiasm.
And just one more point there, too, is kind of interesting. If it's good for customers, if it's good for America, then the waves will hit the beach. You can't keep the waves off the beach in history. And so, therefore, it behooves us to have the kind of vision and the courage to be able to act now and see what may happen. And you said something earlier, invent the future. That's why we have remained deeply invested in research and development. We're the biggest funder of EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, but we do it on our own. You know, I love EPRI. Steve Specker, the old CEO of EPRI, is on my board. And as soon as he came off, I got him up. He's just a brilliant, great guy. But in my opinion, research and development as a co-op, everybody joining in gets a little too vanilla for my tastes. And what we really want from an innovative standpoint is a little edginess, a little testing, a little kind of taking a risk here and there. But in the long run, we've got to test those branches out to see if they make sense. We've got to have vision and courage about the future. If it's good for customers, it will happen. We better get in front of that.
So if innovation to benefit customers is how we get from here to there and not have a Sharknado, let's talk a little bit about that. Tom, you've talked about the R&D that Southern does, and you might talk a little bit about the Southern Prize, which I think folks would be interested in. Lynn, I know you guys, Tom was talking about storage, I know you guys are doing some exciting things with storage. What should utilities be doing now with innovation? And what kinds of innovation should we be looking at to get from here to there?
Yeah, Jenny, give me the So Prize thing. She's like Santa Claus. She's got this big bag full of presents. Thank you. So this is really pretty cool stuff. So it's one thing to say, that we do research and development. Oh, and therefore we're innovative. Well, that's not true. And what I've said about Southern is, you know, in the world of make, move, and sell electricity, we're innovative all the way through that. We're innovative in the way we think about improving heat rates, which is good for the environment, good for the bottom line, good for customers. We're innovative in the wires business, transmission, distribution. We were doing smart grids before smart grids were cool. Even smart meters, we've deployed, I forget how much of them, 4.5 million. We were, I don't know, 1 or 2 in that United States. I'm a former CIO. I really get a kick out of it. You guys know CIO, right? There were so many days I thought CIO stood for career is over, right? We have to be very balanced in kind of the risk and benefit that we take. But just being in R&D and just being cool about make, move, and sell isn't enough. And so I'm really kind of wound up on this idea of how do you unlock an innovative culture? So we started something called the So Prize. You've heard of X Prize before? X Prize? And so we asked folks at Southern, and we kind of opened up in a very broad palette of ideas, contribute. What can you do? We actually offered up a lot of big money for these things. We had a company named MindJet, I think, advise us. They had done these kinds of X Prize ideas for Cisco and a variety of high-tech companies. And sure enough, we got so much participation. It was amazing. By any measure, whether it was the amount of ideas submitted, we did crowd votes, we did all kinds of cool stuff. By any measure, we were 6 to 10 times more successful than even the consultants said we would be. Now, why is that? It's a curse and a blessing. Good news in that we got all this participation. Bad news? I bet people were waiting to be asked. And I think what we've got to do is create corporate cultures where being asked, challenging the status quo, is something that you should do. At the end of the day, we'll send anybody that wants copies. This is the kind of the annual report of our SO Prize. But just give you the quick ideas. The 6 ideas, and I forget how much money they got. Every participant got about $75,000 at the end of the day. So it was stuff like kind of far out stuff. So this is maybe 10 years and beyond, but we're starting now. I think, everybody gets high focused on environmental issues being air. I think the bigger environmental issue of the future is water. And so therefore, why can't we be in the water business? In Atlanta, it's a huge issue. It solves an economic development problem, it solves an environmental problem, and it's good for the electricity growth business. So let's get into water. Desalination plants. Second, hydrogen. I was on a stage with the CEO of Toyota in Aspen last summer, and I was pitching the ideas of, electric transportation. He says, I'm not going to do electric transportation. We're going to go to fuel cells, and we need sources of hydrogen. You know what? Creating more value streams out of the generation we provide is an innovation. And so therefore, look for Southern, perhaps. We're working on it now to get in the hydrogen business. Third thing, pretty easy, was drones. I could talk about that later. Fourth thing is a combination of 2 ideas, and it's the idea of metadata and expanding product and services coupled with new pricing schemes. I think the way utilities price stuff is really old school, and we need to change that. And then the 6th thing was something we call Revolution. It is a full-service electric transportation business, including infrastructure and a variety of other things. Anyway, all of that is summarized in here, plus all the ideas that made honorable mention or the top 20 or whatever. Here's the deal. Innovation is not a what. It is a how. And what I think we have is businesses and folks like you that can help us unlock the how and then create structures inside businesses like ours to implement those and turn them into what's. So that's what we're doing about it.
I would agree that innovation is a part of the DNA of any successful company because you think about the winds of change that impact you. You have to keep moving. You have to keep moving forward. And you have to keep bringing new ideas, whether they're process ideas or whether they're technology ideas to the table, or you will find yourself eroding the value of the franchise and the business that you operate. And so we talk a lot about innovation at Duke. We talk a lot about how we're going to change. We talk a lot about what our customers expect from us. We talk a lot about what investors are looking for from us. And we have had a number of very innovative and research initiatives underway for many years as we've tackled elements of what we see as a changing infrastructure. Carbon capture being one of them. Using carbon to grow algae was something that we worked with at one time. We have battery storage. We have a 35 megawatt battery coupled with a wind farm in West Texas to try to deal with the issue of intermittency. How do we charge it? How do we discharge it? How do we take advantage of peak power prices? How do we use the wind at night? We also have batteries with storage or with solar opportunities all around our system. We have something that we call Envision centers, which are centers that take every form of smart technology and communication technology to try to simulate what it will look like in an environment of either industry or in the home and residences. And so this type of work where we are looking at how we can put together technologies to make us more successful and us better in the future, better able to accommodate all of the things you all are working on is a key part of that. And I would also say partnerships, spending time with vendors, spending time with the research labs, spending time in the industry. Tom mentioned EPRI. There's research and development and innovation going on in many different pockets, and I think it's extraordinarily important. And we look forward to working with companies like those that are represented here to bring ideas into the fore. In large measure, we represent the real-world laboratory, right? We have to do it at scale. We have to do it all the time. And if we can figure out how to partner to accelerate development of technologies that will add value to customers, I think there could be an opportunity for collaboration.
That idea is worth underlining, too. When I go back to this concept of what's and how's, I think if you don't adopt the notion of clean, safe, reliable, affordable, sustainably for decades and the importance of what we offer, just as you said, I think that innovation becomes storefronts and Christmas ornaments. It doesn't become substantive. Somehow what we've got to do is adopt as a cultural challenge a how to integrate these things into our daily lives.
Thank you. And thanks for your question. So first question from the audience is about carbon tax. And the question is a carbon tax the best market solution to address climate change? Lynn?
Oh, you got that. I'm dying.
Tom, I'm going to let you do the carbon tax.
Really?
Can you?
A carbon tax is a dumb idea.
You want me to add?
No.
So
He's rolling with dumb idea.
So when you say dumb idea, do I take that as a no?
And listen, I love dumb ideas. I ask for them all the time. I really do. And in fact, one of the highest compliments I give people at Southern, I go, well, that's not a dumb idea, you know. But here's the thing. Remember when I talked about fiscal policy? Remember I talked about kind of national energy policy and bipartisan support and all that? What we don't need in the United States is more tax. There are carrots and there are sticks. And the idea behind a carbon tax is you're going to create a stick on somebody to behave in a certain way. Don't tax growth. Promote growth in the United States. The biggest single advantage the United States has in a worldwide economic market right now is energy. Don't hurt your biggest competitive advantage. There are other ways to incent the optimal balance of clean, safe, reliable, affordable. Don't do a carbon tax. Dumb idea.
And let me add to Tom's perspective on this just for a moment. And if you look at Duke and the industry, carbon emissions are down over 20% since 2005, 25% in certain of our territories. So we've had the equivalent of what we were trying to achieve legislatively accomplished by market forces. It's the introduction of shale gas and gas technology. It's the introduction of renewables. And we've been able to get there as an industry, making smart choices and taking advantage of market forces. And I think, you know, when you think about the power of the innovation in the United States, I think we need to be careful when we try to incent something in a direction that we don't end up with an unintended consequence. The market is a beautiful thing to accomplish a lot of different objectives.
Yeah, and in America, a fault of the way we kind of run our fiscal business, we tend to think we can do tax policy and make us do all sorts of unnatural acts. Let's get tax policy out of kind of the business of America. That's my comprehensive tax reform speech. I'll spare you.
So,
shall we move on, Stuart?
So I'm sorry we don't have questions that y'all don't have any strong feelings about. So let's talk about distributed generation, namely solar. And the question is about how do you create synergy between the customer and the utility when it comes to distributed generation, especially solar?
I think there's so many opportunities for renewables, and Duke has been a leader in this for many years. We started investing in renewable energy in 2007. It was utility scale primarily, and it was primarily wind, but we've transitioned into solar, and we have been building utility scale solar, community solar, and recently announced an acquisition of REC Solar, where we see an opportunity on commercial rooftops for rooftop offerings. I think what we have to find here is how can we create value for customers, and customers who have an interest in distributed energy or customers who have an interest in renewables. There are options that can be provided to meet that customer need. And we need to have the conversation about what the price of solar is. We need to have the conversation about the value that the utility brings to enable distributed energy resources. And I believe this is an area of great opportunity for collaboration. Collaboration in the spirit of let's move forward, introducing new technologies in a way that makes sense for customers and also for communities.
Okay, another funny story time. Who in here owns a convertible? Raise your hand. Oh, man. Okay, let me pick somebody. Oh, you are out of your mind. You're crazy for owning a convertible, aren't you? Right? you're crazy. Now, because an engineer will tell you that the right car to buy has this kind of shape and economy, and the reason you own a convertible is not because it gets best gas mileage or because it's safest or because it has the cheapest insurance. It's because there's some value deal that you like in a convertible, all right? I would argue that's where you are on rooftop solar. Delighted. You want to own rooftop solar, you want to put it on your house, that's great. An engineer will tell you, and I get these guys come into this other company management accounts all the time, rooftop solar has no future in America because it's not economic, it's not safe, high capital costs. If people want to buy it, I want to sell it. My point is this. There are lots of really cool on-the-horizon distributed generation things. One of them may be rooftop solar combined with storage. Now, like I said before, I don't think distributed generation in and of itself is all that disruptive. We should do it, and if somebody wants it, God bless them, we'll buy it, and we'll provide it. Combining, if we can unlock the storage question, if we can, see, I don't think lithium-ion batteries are really the answer. We've got to get a breakthrough there. We're working with national labs. Part of our research is now trying to dive deeper into what could be a cutting-edge storage technology on a micro level. That's the answer. See, I think community kind of solar is a better answer than rooftop solar. But if somebody wants it, have at it. I think that's great.
And in the interest of safety, we will suggest to the gentleman with the convertible that top-down today is not recommended, or at least please bundle up.
But people will do it because they have different value choices. They want to make a statement, or they want to commit to a green approach, or whatever it is. You know, fantastic. Everything is valid here.
No, it's part of adding value to customers. I mean, at the end of the day, what we provide is a service, and if the customer wants to provide, wants to have an interest in how that service is delivered, we need to accommodate that. We need to find a way to make it work. We need to find a way to make it fit in the portfolio.
For the record, the panel supports convertibles, but we do recommend no top-down when it's less than 10 degrees. So this question is about Germany. Scott Madden partnered with SEPA and recently led a fact-finding trip, 30 executives to Germany, and kind of came back thinking it's not what the headlines say. What this questioner asks is, how can our industry and your utility learn from the energy transformation going on in Germany, especially considering it as an industrial, developed, robust economy?
We've spent a lot of time studying Germany at Duke. We've also spent a lot of time studying Spain. We're studying Hawaii. We're studying California. We're studying the UK. The UK is undertaking regulatory reform to achieve certain objectives, because I believe watching what develops in other markets can be quite instructive. You're looking for the things that worked well in those markets, and you're also looking for the things that didn't work as well. And they have gone through quite a rapid transformation. I think for those of you who've studied it, they're closing all their nuclear plants by 2022. They have quite large penetration of distributed energy resources. And although at one level they started down a path of achieving an objective of a lower carbon future, in fact their carbon emissions are rising because they're backing up the renewables with coal generation. And so we look at this and say that's a great market to understand how renewables have had an impact on the market, but we would like to promote a policy that has a more balanced approach to keep a more diversified set of resources, to keep an eye on carbon emissions, to keep an eye on industrial competitiveness, and to keep an eye on pricing overall. So I think there are positives and negatives from Germany, and something that we should continue to study to get to an answer that makes sense for America. We've said it a number of times. It's not about the utility business. It's about economic competitiveness, and it's about reliable and affordable energy for the citizens and Americans that we serve.
Yeah, I'd say all that stuff. I'm going to say it a little more edgy. If you look at the worldwide economy right now, whose cards would you rather have, us or Europe? How good has the European Union been at setting any kind of policy? Now, it's a little rough to say, but when I think about the response that the United States had to Fukushima relative to the response that many countries in Europe had, I think the Obama administration, Congress, our regulators, our states, were right on the money. The response to shut down nuclear is almost unbelievably wrong when you're trying to think about clean, safe, reliable, affordable, and providing a safe balance on all that. I'll stop there.
Thank you. So you've both talked about storage and large-scale storage. Lynn, you talked about the 35 megawatts in Texas, and Tom, you talked about that as being transformational. This question asks you to imagine a future where that comes true. The question is, how could large-scale, low-cost energy storage play in an options-based approach for utilities?
Oh, sure. So you're talking large scale.
Yes.
Actually, large scale, small scale, same thing. Although it will manifest itself differently. So, large scale storage. It's almost, think about what natural gas storage is or oil storage, all right? So the idea will be that any kind of cubic yard of air that is compressed in the earth represents a potential energy resource. So to the extent it costs you something to capture it and store it, to the extent prices go to a point where the extraction now of that compressed air energy resource makes sense, then you'll consume it. And so there will be this kind of balance of capture, store, consume. We can certainly do that in a big way. It makes perfect sense in an energy portfolio. And the beauty of those approaches is it lends itself perfectly to an options-based strategy. When you think about the gas companies today, or even us, I bet you own gas storage somewhere. Do you?
A little bit. A little bit.
We actually own a pretty good bit. It's not, you know, but the idea is this. You want to be able to extract it to balance out the volatility. Otherwise, we suffer with kind of a higher variable resource. So to the extent we store gas, gas prices are high, we don't buy off the spot market, we take it out of the storage facility, and we balance it out. It is an options-based approach. Any kind of storage, whether it is great big scale compressed air energy storage, whether it is a localized gas supply, whether it is coal on the ground, whether it is...
I'll talk about one, pumped hydro.
Yeah, there you go.
We have one of the
Same
most
thing.
glorious engineered pumped hydro facilities in the Duke system. That's probably one of the most valuable things that we own. It was coupled with nuclear generation, where nuclear generation at night pumps water into a reservoir, and then like 2,500 megawatts of storage is available during peak periods to power this area. And it's so complementary to so many resources, including renewables. And so we participate and enjoy that option value here in the Carolinas absolutely every day. And it's a great illustration of the option value of any other kind of technology storage that we have. And it can be a great complement to other resources.
Yeah, exactly. It's a perfect, any storage device, even let's go to the micro example of little batteries. Little batteries in your home that work when your solar panel doesn't, that kind of thing. Look, all of that represents an option-based strategy. And if those things are economic relative to other resources, customers will use them, and I want to sell them.
So we asked for questions with an edge to them, and here's one. If it's about us, then why don't you provide customers with more information about their electricity consumption and rates, information that would influence behavior so they could change and reduce their peak loads?
Yeah, I think the whole industry is trying to move that way. We're trying to do it. We use, our favorite right now is called O-Power, I think is what it is. But it's an idea where what we do is if this part of the audience lived in the same neighborhood, we would essentially give you kind of normalized data about your bill and how you use energy and all that. And one of kind of the interesting cultural, social impacts of that would be that, you know, you kind of get in competition with what your neighbors are doing. Now, we do it all on a no-name basis, so there's not a privacy problem or any of that. The other thing we do, I'm sure you do this, is energy audits. We do try to give more information about what's available, how to use our product more wisely. Because remember, I think this whole idea of energy efficiency is, for most people in our industry, totally wrong. It's about us, and it means sell less. I think that's dead wrong. Energy efficiency is about you, and if you can use my product more effectively, cheaper, my hope is, displacing other nasty forms of energy, you'll use more and make your life better.
I think the question is a great one, and we're moving in that direction. The things that Tom talked about, we offer as well, but I think there's more opportunity, and in our meters, we have had an opportunity to experiment with providing more information. We actually offered time of use rates to residential customers in certain of our markets. I'm sorry to tell you we had 32 people who wanted it out of the thousands that we offered. So trying to find the right balance of what is the information that customers want is a continual challenge that we pursue. But I think the point of being a smarter energy consumer is something that our customers want, and I think that's something that we need to continue to innovate around and have the technologies to support that. I think Tom talked about the Internet of Things and the complementary work that could go on over time among appliances. That's another huge innovation that will help customers use energy more wisely.
You know, Lynn mentioned rate setting as an important time of use rates. Something like half of our, if you added up our industrial load and our commercial load, something like half of that load is tied up in real-time pricing at Georgia. They've been the early leader and by far the greatest penetration of creative pricing schemes. But I still think as an industry, we're way off that. And, you know, the industry has grown up on a consumption-based pricing scheme. It would probably be helpful to everybody if we went to more of a fixed variable pricing scheme. That will allow you and let you do all sorts of interesting things like free weekends and holidays and all kinds of stuff. Think about telecom pricing relative to the way we do it.
I think that raises an interesting point in that we're talking about innovation around technology. We're talking about innovation around value that customers may want. But I think that some innovation around pricing and even regulation that we operate under will have to be a part of that over time. We do not differentiate pricing. We do not, we sell by volume, every kilowatt hour worth the same. We do not unbundle our prices so that you know what's transmission, what's distribution, and what's generation. And as we continue to innovate and slice the, what do we call it, the make, deliver, and
make, move, and sell.
Make, move, and sell. As we continue to innovate around each element of that, I think innovation around pricing and regulation could be an important part of that work.
Yep, absolutely. And it's sell/consume. I always shorthand that.
Thank you. This will be the last question, and it's about behind the meter. Would you all rather own the behind-the-meter technologies in the long run or contract them to others? And what is the future for behind-the-meter? There's been a lot of discussion, but not so much adoption quite yet.
So in terms of technologies, that's kind of a trick question. I want to be an arms dealer. I want to be able to get whatever makes sense and sell it to whoever wants it. I don't want to be wed to a particular technology. That's kind of my posture on photovoltaics. Like, I love kind of the PV solar. I'm not a fan of thermal solar because it consumes water. But PV solar, I love it. I love First Solar as a company. We do a ton of business with them. But I don't like just First Solar solar panels. So in terms of technology in a home, I want to be able to use whatever makes sense wherever the customer wants it. The trick, the nuance, I would say, is energy infrastructure. Make, move, sell means generating plants, it means transmission, it means distribution, and it stops at a meter. To the extent there's infrastructure in a home, I think that's fair game for us to play.
And I agree with that. I think this notion of behind the meter is a topic we talk about today. I don't think we'll be talking about it in 5 years. Because I think from the source of any form of generation all the way to the utilization of the electron is what we're talking about. It's not a grid, it's a delivery mechanism to customers. And you think about energy efficiency and all the things that are going on. Every time someone buys a new dishwasher, refrigerator, or air conditioning system, there's energy efficiency going on behind the meter that I have nothing to do with. And so I think it's just innovation occurring throughout the whole system of delivery and consumption of energy. And to the extent we can bring value to customers, we'd love to have the opportunity to do that. And I think that'll be part of the ongoing innovation.
We are so fortunate to have had you guys on this panel and have had such great leaders sharing information with us today. Please join me in...
Hey, wait, excuse me, just before.
I thought we were going to give Lynn the last word.
No, I want to thank Lynn. She's the host utility here, and I'm a guest. And I just want to say thank you for your graciousness.
It's been a pleasure.
Being with
Thank
you.
you, Tom.
I think Duke's a great company. I want to thank the UNC and all the folks for giving us this opportunity. These are not kind of issues on an island. These are issues that we need everybody's engagement to solve. Creating this best balance of clean, safe, reliable, affordable is America's job. Let's do it the right way, and let's grow as well as we can and make America better.
And thanks for the opportunity for the conversation. This is what we live every day. You can tell we live this every day. We take our responsibility of delivering safe, affordable, and reliable energy very seriously. It is a privilege to serve North Carolina, South Carolina, and all the regions that we're a part of. And to have an opportunity to talk about our business and figure out ways we can do it better is what we welcome. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Please join me in thanking the panelists.